So those are the different design standards that we usually refer to whenever we design highway and bridge structures. But it's not enough to be familiar with those different design standards. We have to also know how to use these design standards. It does not take one long to reach the disclaimer in a set of design standards like those listed here. While in a way, this may frustrate an engineer looking for the answer in a reference, it should also serve as a signal for the responsibility the engineer carries in any design. So just like what I'm saying, those design standards, it's not enough to be familiar with those design standards only. We have to know as well how to use these design standards because as we all know, these design standards are just a guide for us to be able to design a highway or bridge structure. So they do not guarantee success in terms of the design, but they are just giving a guide on how to design a particular highway or bridge structure. That's why whenever you look on a particular design code, you can notice that there is what we call a disclaimer, such as this coming from the AISC. Uh, a specification for structural steel buildings. This is actually a disclaimer that can be found on AASC 360-05, the specification for structural steel buildings. So you can see here on this disclaimer and another disclaimer that can be seen on other design code that it was said here that while it is believed to be accurate, this information should not be used or relied upon for any specific application without competent professional examination and verification of its accuracy, suitability, and applicability by a licensed professional engineer, designer, or architect. So you can usually see this kind of words, which are actually disclaimer, for every design code or design standard that we refer to whenever we design a highway or bridge structure. So you can see here that the reference, or should I say the 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 reference to these different design codes uh, do not guarantee absolute success to the design itself. They do not guarantee uh, 100% safeness and quality with respect to the design. So they they uh, they are particular that the the whole responsibility for the design itself will still lie on the design professional that conducts the design itself. So you can easily see that disclaimer on every design code. This disclaimer are usually located on sometimes on the preface or before the preface of any design code. So you can see here that as a professional, as an engineer, we still have to be the main responsible for the design that we carry. So we must not only refer to this design standards that we have discussed blindly. So we must not be a blind follower of this design standard. We have to incorporate as well our engineering judgment whenever we refer to this design standards. Just like what Salmon and Johnson said on their book, The Steel Structures, Design and Behavior, 5th edition. And may I just quote on section 1.7 of that book, it was said there that a specification containing a set of rules is intended to ensure safety. However, the designer must understand the behavior for which the rule applies. Otherwise, An absurd design may result either unsafe or grossly conservative. So you can see here on the code or on my code from the book of Salmon and Johnson that it is it is being emphasized that the designer himself or herself must still be the responsible professional for the design that he or she undertakes. So he or she must not solely rely on what is being stated on the design standards that he or she is being uh, referring to. So there must be an engineering judgment that must always be incorporated on the design. Otherwise, the design may be absurd or unsafe or grossly conservative. So just that it's just the fact that we don't have to use the design standards as the absolute key for the success of our design. The design standards do not guarantee the the safeness of our design. So it will still be our responsibility as a designer or as a professional to incorporate our own engineering judgment to know whether when can we apply a particular provision on a particular standard. So we have to incorporate our engineering judgment to know their accuracy, their suitability, and applicability, because not all of the things that are stated on a design standard are applicable to any case or scenario in a construction or design project. So therefore, there must be a intervention or professional intervention so that we will not blindly follow the design standard itself. The design should define the boundary conditions, and the specifications should apply to those constraints, not the other way around. So aside from knowing that the design standards are just a guide, therefore the responsibility will still lie on the designer himself or herself. Aside from that, we have to know as well that design standards, specifications are just a guide. They are not the one putting limitations to our design. It should be our design that will specify the boundary conditions or limitations and not the specifications, because some professionals see specifications as a set of standards that will limit design. Actually, it's not the work of specification to limit or put a constraint on our design. It's our design that must put constraints or boundary conditions on the design itself, not the specifications. It's not the other way around. It's not the specification that puts constraints or limitations to our design. The design should define the boundary conditions itself. The bridge engineer should also think to question and improve upon reference design material whenever possible. There is still considerable room for improvement. So aside from this, these things that we have to know whenever we use design standards, aside from those, we should also think to question and improve always every design code that we use as reference, because we all know that these design codes, as the disclaimers manifest, these design codes are not perfect, so there are still considerable room for improvement. And we cannot improve these design codes if we do not question the particular provisions that we can see on these provisions. So whenever we use these design codes as reference, We must not just solely rely on it and believe on everything that are written on these codes. So we must question them as well. Question so that we can know how to improve these particular provisions of these codes that we use as reference in our design. So we must not just 100% or fully rely on what is being stated on these design codes. We must also help to improve these specifications by questioning them in a good way. So we have to question them in a good way, not in a bad way. So the purpose of the questioning must always be for the further improvement of the design code itself.